has no meaning whatsoever as far as my next guest is Scott Waller. I just want to preface that. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning. How are you?
Thought, okay, you never know what the guest will think about this. Well, why is he playing that for me? How are you, sir?
I'm doing really well, although
Good.
I can't help but think of the, paraphrasing the Charles Dickens lines. It's the best of times, it's the worst of times. We've got our MEC annual meeting coming up next week. We will kick off a celebration of our 75th year at MEC. So a really great day ahead, but it's an extended session of the legislature, so we're still fighting some things there that are kind of crazy. So
take some time, and we'll talk about those because they are important to the people of the state of Mississippi. And I mentioned earlier when you start looking at this, 4 months is like a leap year type thing. It's we started this process, and I say we is the media and everybody else who follows this. But for the men and women in the House and the Senate and who are all of the minutia that's under the dome, you gotta say thank you to them for public service because they've been doing this way back when they woke up the morning after New Year's Day.
Mm-hmm. So, it's been long. Yeah, it's only April, but it seems like it's November. So.
Oh gosh, it just feels like it's 16 months. And you sit there and you, especially for the first timers, they've got to be looking at this and saying, "Did I really sign up for this? Did I work so hard for this?" And I don't think they're paid enough in some cases. To be honest with you.
And I'll say this too. I mean, we are very fortunate in Mississippi. We have our differences, but we don't have we're not indifferent. I mean, so we get along. I mean, the great thing about it is we've got the people in the legislature are really great people. Sometimes that they may do something that you disagree with, or you may have to sit down and have a long talk to make them understand what's really happening here. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's the good thing we have about Mississippi is that we are people that, regardless of how we feel about legislation, regardless of how we feel about politics, we care about each other. And at the end of the day,
I mean, Scott and I are not being just trying to be nice on this. When you more so now than ever before, because 15 or 20 years ago, you'd have to go to the Capitol to actually partake in this. Now, with YouTube and everything being video and audio, you can sit there and watch that. And you'll watch, especially when a bill is heated, some of the questions there, the frustration, some of the terse language, maybe some of the shouting. You think, "Whoa, there's going to be a fight!" And all of a sudden, when it's over and they adjourn for the day, they're out at the steakhouse having drinks together. So
it's good, but I think sometimes there's just one of the differences is we is what we do at MEC and others in the association world and those that kind of lobby issues. We kind of have to be the ones that inform. And in some cases, and the difference in, say, the state legislature versus something at the federal level. At the federal level, you're dealing with staff who have an understanding of what's going on and really can kind of provide a lot more. At our level, we're dealing directly with the legislator themselves. And that's I kind of like that. I've been doing this for a while now. And having that personal relationship with the actual legislator is important. So.
Well, I'll say this not to poof up your organization, but it's got to be the most exciting time in the history of the 75 years. When you sit there and you look at what's going on, the mega sites being cleared, the news that's happening out there. I just mentioned this a little bit earlier this morning. All the towns that are they are supported by economic businesses in their towns to make them who they are and the award-winning things that are going on. But had a couple of more today on the coast, the best two coast towns in the nation.
Well, it really is kind of, when you think about what's happening in the state of Mississippi and the fact that, we've said for a long time, it's the connections we have, it's the cost of living, it's the things that we have in Mississippi that, we don't have that huge city that's going to attract people that also attracts a lot of other things. I think there's just a way of life here that's special. And having grown up in Mississippi and been here, practically my entire life, it's really something that is very important to keep that to keep that connectedness. So, and that's one of the reasons I'm excited about. The best of times portion of it is the fact that next week we will be celebrating 75 years, and we're gonna celebrate it all year long, and we're gonna kick it off with our annual meeting, which starts next Thursday with our morning sessions at 9:30. And I know that the Gallo Show is going to be there with us to kick it off, and we're very excited. We've got if you'll just allow me real quick, I'm just going to run down kind of what's going to happen starting at 9. We have our kind of concurrent sessions that will go on. We're going to look at 2 issues. One is defining AI, kind of what, there's a lot of people talking about what AI this, AI that, the artificial intelligence is changing things. But we want to look at how does it really directly impact your business or, and how you're doing business. Secondly, we're working with a group out of Ole Miss, and that one is, the AI one is going to be really, we're working with the Mississippi Coalition on AI that's doing that, and it's sponsored by the Hinds County Economic Development Authority. And then the All in the Family is really, it's sponsored as part of the University of Mississippi's Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Every year in the fall, they do something called It's All Relative. It's a summit about multi-generational businesses in Mississippi and how they're continuing to keep those businesses moving forward. So we're going to have a panel on that. And then I'm really excited about our plenary session, which is going to look at the results of the survey that we have been doing on our tour across the state so far, and really kind of deal with kind of that, taking a look at a variety of economic issues, workforce development, the overall economy, which, actually, get all things considered, there's a very strong optimism still about our economy here in Mississippi. So we've got some panelists that are going to talk about economic development, workforce, child care, the role the military plays in our state. So I think we've got some really good stuff. And then we'll cap it off with our keynote speaker is Mike Randall. He's the founder and publisher of Southern let me make sure I get this right here, Southern Business and Development. And he's been following economic development for decades and really has his kind of finger on the pulse of what's happening. And to your point earlier, you look at what's happened in Mississippi in the last 2 years. You look at the aluminum plant, you look at the battery plant, you look at now AWS, all of the things that are happening in Mississippi that are really getting national attention and kind of changing the way people view us as a state. So we're excited about that. So we think we've got a really good lineup on informational programming, and then of course we always have a little bit of entertainment. And this year this year's no different. We've got Bill Allison and Temperance Babcock and Jeff Perkins is going to come. Their little trio will be entertaining us during the luncheon. So a great day. And if anybody's interested, just msmec.com or we'll help you.
Same location, right?
Same location, Jackson Convention Center. So we're very excited about the annual meeting.
We want to talk about the legislature and some bills that you are watching and concerned with pertaining to the economic development. But I saw this in the news yesterday. S&P Global Ratings, one of the 3 credit rating agencies, has lowered Mississippi's outlook from stable to negative, citing concerns that weak state economic trends, continuing tax cuts, and state's massive government pension plan. S&P lowered the outlook, usually considered a fiscal warning shot to the governments in March, but it did not lower the state's relatively good credit ratings of AA on its general obligation debt or its ratings on other types of debt. But it said the outlook on all Mississippi ratings is negative. Have you read that report?
I've seen something on it. I haven't read it in detail, but I think a lot of this is being driven by the discussion as it relates to the retirement system, if I had to guess. Because I think even, you mentioned the tax cuts. I think you mentioned this I was listening one day, I think it was earlier this week, and you talked about, the Legislative Budget Committee had actually set this year's budget higher than last year.
Yes.
So I think there's still an optimism that, the revenue is coming in, things are going good. So as those slowly, taking the approach of slowly faking it out gives you time to make up the difference. And I think we're going to be fine on that front. But, the other's an issue it's really above my pay grade as it relates to PERS, but I think that's probably part of what's driving that, if I had to guess.
When you start looking at the health of small businesses in the state, what's your assessment of that?
Well, I think we are a small business state. So when we think about it from that perspective, we have to be doing things that's going to protect our small businesses. So there's a couple of things out there, and it's kind of apropos you use the word health because they relate to health that I want to talk about when we come back. Yeah. That really are things that I think we need to look at very seriously before we start putting what I would think are regulations on things that's going to drive up the cost of doing business. So.
We'll talk more about that coming up with Scott Waller. It was kind of interesting because we had a couple of weeks ago had Joe Max on, and this week we had Joey Deason, and both of them have kind of hinted that there are some other things coming very soon. So,
and they're not the only economic developers that have hinted that to me as well. So.
That's exactly right. We'll talk about that when we return in a moment. It's the ever young Bobby Rush. What do we say, Lance? How old is he now?
88, I believe.
80, or 90, or somewhere close to that.
By the time he gets back to Mississippi, he might be 90. He's world traveling, man. He's all over.
I think he also goes down every once in a while, gets a rejuvenation with some crawdads down to Louisiana. But heck of a guy. Looking forward to getting him back on. There's a battle out there, and what a good general said is when the enemy is out of bullets, you shouldn't call timeout and give them a chance to reload. And I say that is an analogy of these people up in the northern states are screwing up big time. There was a story here. Scott Waller is my guest, President, CEO, Mississippi Economic Council. And the story was out of San Francisco, one after the other. Is just California constantly does things that hurt him. They're working on a new bill that was going to require store owners. They're going to give them 6 months. They got to give 6 months notice before they close down. This is going to be possibly the law of the land, and if they don't, the customer has a right to sue them. And that's creative thinking. The crimes are, as more stores are closing due to the rising cost of crime and unsanitary conditions. One Whole Food location shut down within a year after over 600 emergency calls to police. So instead of cleaning up the community, San Francisco has decided to punish the store owners and force them to deal with crime. So if they do close, you have to give notification, and if not, the population can sue you. I'm sure they'll be more than glad to find a class action lawyer.
You know, Paul, one of the things that makes Mississippi wonderful is that we do not overregulate. But one of the things that's concerning me about this session is there's some bills out there that are starting to do that.
Let's talk about those.
We mentioned health care just a minute ago as it related to things that are happening. And there's a couple of pieces of legislation that's concerning to us. One's already on its way to the governor. It's House Bill 1410, and what it does is it interferes with contracts that were put in other states. So it really kind of is an interstate commerce issue, which it has to do with actually reimbursements for health care. And each state should have the right to do their own thing and not do it under this law. Our insurance department would have that ability. So that's one of those that I think has some legal ramifications that we may be having to deal with. But the other is you and I have talked before about the pharmacy benefit management. Early in the session, we were working with the House trying to resolve some of the issues, and some of the stuff that we talked about, we really were looking at how do we address some of the issues that exist, but do it in a way that's not onerous or expensive for our businesses. We got some things through, into that or out of that, but it didn't quite get to where it needed to be, and it failed. The Senate had one that failed for a totally different reason. But on Wednesday, at the very last minute, just before they adjourned, they took a piece of legislation. The way our rules work, if the code section's there, you can drop anything that's related to that code section, stripped out all the original language, and dropped it back in. Well, there are two really big red flags to me. Now, there's a lot of details to this bill, and I'll talk about whatever you want to in the details, but I just want to throw out two red flags on any piece of legislation that's claiming to save money. Number one is this legislation takes out the state health insurance plan. So if this is truly a piece of legislation that's going to save money, why are the 189,982 members of the state health plan not going to get to see those savings? I think the answer to that is it really doesn't save money. Secondly, the reason the bill originally failed in the Senate was it was going to move the authority over PBMs back to the Department of Insurance, which is where it really should be. It's with the Department of Insurance in 48 states across this country, but for some reason we're an outlier in Mississippi, and it's with the Pharmacy Board, which is made up of lay people within the pharmacy world. It's not, somebody said, well, the Banking Commission oversees banks. I said, yeah, but they're state employees, they're regulators, that's their job, much like the Insurance Commission. This is a lay board. So when you think about it, it's really, I hate to use this term, but it's the truth. It's the fox guarding the hen house. So if those two things are in this piece of legislation, that should throw up a big red flag right off the bat. So hopefully, as they look at all of the things, and there's again, a lot of minutia to all these bills.
What's the bill number?
That bill number is 1265. There's a lot of minutia, but there's some things.
HB 1265.
HB 1265, I believe, is the bill number. But, at the end of the day, if we're talking about health care, what we should be talking about is how do we improve access to health care? How do we improve lowering cost? How do we improve quality? And these two I don't think do. Now, I am optimistic. I feel like, MEC has said, look, we've got to find a way to improve access to health care for working Mississippians. The legislation, the House bill, I think it's 1725, is still out there. It's our hope and our we think, we have an opportunity for our legislators to get together and work out some issues on this issue to help us continue to move that ball down the road. Because I think that's one of the things that's important is that we've got to be able to, particularly for working Mississippians, how do we do it? But the other two pieces of legislation are about putting regulations that are going to cost more on the backs of Mississippi workers, and that's not what we need to be doing in our state.
Before you go there, let me double back on this one. Does this correlate in any way with HB 1647 on the health exchanges? Is that?
Well, that's more in the, I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not an expert on health exchanges, but I think it's more along the lines of what would be done as a result of anything that may be done on access to health care, which is where we're, which is what MEC has said. Has made its statement. We are asking the leaders to work together to find a way to improve access to health care for working Mississippians, and we hope that happens.
I think we're trying to get Mike Cheney on to talk about this maybe next week as far as the health exchanges, because there's some proposals on that bill. So you were talking about other bills, though.
Yeah, and I think there's just a couple of those that are just, when you talk about it from a cost perspective, we've got to be very careful that we're not doing something for the sake of trying to address an issue. And honestly, I'm going to just say this because it's what it is. Particularly the PBM bill is being pushed by the independent pharmacists claiming they can't make it. Well, honestly, if you go back and look, and I've got the data that shows in the last 10 years, there's been a 12% increase in the number of independent pharmacists across the state of Mississippi. So they're growing. At the same time, retail pharmacies have dropped by 36%. So I think there's some information that don't quite align as to what their reasoning for wanting to do this is versus the what the bill will actually end up doing to again, I go back to the working Mississippians, because ultimately you make, well, PBMs are bad, the insurance companies are bad, we're going to make them pay. Well, ultimately it's going to be trickled down to those who hold the policy and pay for the policy. And our businesses across the state have looked at this very carefully, and our members have told us we like the way we have the right to negotiate our own contract. We are pleased with how the contracts are going. Nothing's ever perfect, but don't take that ability away from us by forcing us to do things that's going to cost us more money. So that's what we're trying to stop.
I've often just watched this over the years, and when you start getting to these chains, the Walgreens, et cetera, you kind of want to go back to the local drugstore that didn't try to sell TV dinners and soup and everything else. Just be a pharmacy and center on that one. But it's been remarkable, and they have had a lot that closed down through mergers and everything else.
Well, especially at the retail level. But again, I think it's the independent market is strong just based on the facts. Every January, there's a report that comes out, and it actually lists where we are. And now, granted, during COVID, there was a little bit dip in everything, but they're starting to come back, and you're starting to see more of them. But again, when the numbers bear out that the independent pharmacies are growing in the state, and we want to see that. Just so you'll know, it's Quest Analysis that does this from the National Council of Prescription Drug Programs. So, I mean, the data is the data, and you can't dispute that. But but that's just one of the things that we're working on. We're trying to make legislators understand this is not the approach. There are some things that we can do that can help us, because honestly, some of the stuff that's in this PPM bill is exactly what was in some legislation in Oklahoma that's now in litigation, that is making it all. That the state of Oklahoma is trying to decide if they want to go to the Supreme Court with it, because they've lost everywhere else along the way. So, that's just one more thing where we end up in litigation over stuff that we didn't have to if we just sit down and talk about it, and that's our goal. So,
is it hard getting that message to the rank and file, or is most of the legislators?
I think some of them are very understanding of it. I think others are just saying, hey, this we've been saying we're going to do something, so we got to do something. Mm-hmm. Please don't do something for the sake of doing something. Please do the right thing. That's what we're saying. But, that aside, there are some really other good things out there that I want to touch on. We
got a final segment to do that.
So I think there's some things, but I just wanted to spend a few minutes to explain. There's some real concerns on that front.
We have a guy named Marshall Toplansky, who is a professor, saying something that's a lot of wisdom as far as California is concerned. And the MEC is one of the groups out there that try to bring it all together and take advantage of bringing business to the state of Mississippi and making sure everything is healthy and showing the people from other parts of the country we are a good place to call home. That and more. But it gives you an idea of the opportunities that we have in the state. So just wanted to throw that out. Any comments on that?
Well, when you think about where we are, again, you talked about the family side of things. We're looking. One of our things that we're working on in MEC is that what we call the Mississippi Talent Initiative. How do we attract and retain more of our young professionals? Look, we've got some really bright young professionals across the state. We were able to see that when we did some, focus sessions, about a dozen focus sessions with people between the ages of 25 and 40, and why they were in Mississippi, why they either stayed or why they came, and what's going to keep them here. And I think we just got a world of opportunity to capitalize on finding ways to do that. And I'm excited about that, because it comes back to we'll go back to what you started the last segment with. When you overregulate, then people, businesses themselves want to go elsewhere. But if you make the business climate strong, which we have here in Mississippi, businesses want to come here. And when that happens, and we continue to grow that, and we've seen that over the last couple of years really begin to start to move. Let's really capitalize on that, and that gives us that opportunity to really create a place where people want to be, where they can work and they can enjoy life.
And that cost of living is always going up and up and up and up with every regulation you put, and those two things are tied together. And if you don't believe it, go look at California, go look at New York, go look at Chicago and places such as that. And when you constantly hear this, we looked at Mississippi, and one of the things we liked was the family atmosphere and also the cost of living. And that cost of living mattered to them long term. So what do you think the next step is?
Well, I think we've got to continue what we have been doing, especially as it relates to workforce development and funding some of the things that are out there, because when you look at it, our Office of Workforce, which is Accelerate Mississippi, is only 3 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And it
took a long time to get there.
It took a long time to get it established, and it just doesn't happen overnight. And I think of this, and I think I heard Governor Reeves make this statement a couple of years ago. He said, you look at what happened with third grade reading gate, and over a 10-year period, how much advancements we made. In fourth grade reading, we went from 49th to 21st. I mean, those are real numbers. But it didn't happen the very next year. So the same thing with our Office of Workforce Development. The progress that's being made is tremendous, but think about where we're going to be in another 7 or 8 years on this. So, I mean, that's what's good. So we've got some legislation out there that we really want to see happen that will continue to properly fund the department, allow us to create the third division, which is dealing directly with training as it relates, customizable training as it relates to economic development. One of the things that MDA is doing well, and I was talking about our plenary session at the annual meeting. Bill Cork who is the executive director of MDA, and Courtney Taylor, who is executive director of Accelerate, will be on that panel looking over what the survey results are saying as it relates to workforce development and economic development. So the work that's being done is really amazing. And I think it's the focus of our governor, and that's where we have to continue to put our attention. So if we can, the legislation that's going through that talks about funding these programs, that talks about continuing to increase funding for our career coaches, all of that is that next step that you just asked me about. What is our next step? Our next step is to keep doing this, but fund it in a way that we're really making progress.
Has your organization addressed any solutions to this as far as the unemployable or the employable who are out of the workplace, and just not looking for a job?
Well, I think that there's two things on that front. I mean, Mississippi is not unique to a workforce labor participation rate. My colleagues around the country view this as a major issue. I'm fortunate enough to serve as chair of a national association of state chambers has created the workforce transformation coalition, and I've been working with the groups, working with folks from across the state, and it's a problem everywhere. But if we are able to kind of get the word out, and that's what our effort is with our AIM initiative, is let's talk about how do we make sure that we're getting the right programs that match with businesses' needs, and then make people understand how they get that training and what the end result means on it. So it's
real quick, almost out of time here.
Yeah.
Would Medicaid expansion hurt that or help that?
As I said earlier, I think when it comes to access to health care for working Mississippians, that's a priority, and I think we have to have a way that they can do that. And we have to have those things in place.
Real quick, one more time. When is it and where is it? And not too late to join.
It's not too late. Our annual meeting is next Thursday, April the 18th at the Jackson Convention Complex. We've got a great day of programming. Registration starts at 8:30 in the morning. We'll finish up with a luncheon, and we'll have everybody on their way back home by 1:30 at the latest. Just go to mec.ms to learn more, and we'd love to have you all be there. We look forward to having SuperTalk with us to kick off the morning.
Well done, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate